Pokemon is now allowing you to use one restricted Pokemon on your team. So today, we're going to go over one of the newest and most hyped up legendaries, Miridon, and how you can use it to find success. As soon as Miridon's ability was announced, Miridon looked like it was going to be one of the best restricted Pokemon in the game. There were even some concerns if Miridon and Koraidon would be legal at the end of their first competitive cycle in Scarlet and Violet and how that would break the metagame. A couple years later, Miridon is viable for play, and at first glance, it did look to be S tier. Future Paradox Pokemon have an ability called Quark Drive, and we've seen multiple different Future Paradox Pokemon be viable over the last couple of rule sets. Most notably, Iron Hands and Iron Bundle have been at the top of that list, but more recently we've seen Iron Crown, and some niche cases seen Iron Jugulus and Iron Moth get some play. What they lacked though was a reliable way to activate their ability outside of holding a booster energy, a single-use item that activates Quark Drive, giving a boost over to its highest trained stat. The only other way to do that was to set electric terrain, so you could either do that through Electric Terrain Prankster Thundurus Incarnate, or Pincurchin. And the strategies with either of those Pokemon were pretty limited. For a short time, there was a team where Thundurus would come in and set the electric terrain, Iron Hands comes in, sets up a Sword Stance boost, and gets a defensive boost from the terrain, and that did make Iron Hands more difficult to knock out, but was still a strategy that you could play around. Now in Miraidon, it's opened up some new doors to not only have an instant electric terrain upon entering the field, but a very powerful setter at that. Miraidon is a dual electric and dragon type Pokemon that has the signature ability Hadron Engine. Hadron Engine sets up the electric terrain once Miraidon enters the field, but also provides a roughly 33% special attack boost to Miraidon while the electric terrain is active. What's really cool about this too is that Miraidon doesn't actually need to be grounded on the electric terrain in order to get that boost. So you could terrestrialize Miraidon to say a flying type. I don't know why you would do that, but it would still get the Hadron Engine boost regardless. Okay, here's where I get to geek out a little bit. Science! A hadron is a subatomic particle that is made up of two or more quarks held together by strong interaction. What's really cool is that you have these Pokemon with Quark Drive, right? And Miraidon is able to glue a team together with all of those Quark Drive users with its ability Hadron Engine. It's all very sweet. It gets even cooler when you think about Miraidon's signature move, Electro Drift. Electro Drift's move description says the user races forward at ultra fast speeds, piercing its target with futuristic electricity. This is where I bring up the Hadron Collider at CERN, which is a particle accelerator which sometimes takes the form of a circular shape, and Miraidon has these really cool circular tire things. You guys get where I'm going with this. Science is cool, and Game Freak always brings the top-notch references. Back to the topic at hand, Miraidon's signature ability increases Miraidon's special attack stat by roughly 32%, which is already on top of the special attack stat that it has of 135, and Electro Drift, its signature move, does an additional 33% damage if it's super effective into the target. Miraidon is essentially the opposite of Koraidon, with special attack versus attack, which also canonically makes sense. While the base stats and the specials used differ, we can still draw some parallels between the two box legendaries. In order to get Miraidon, you need to have completed the post-game of Pokemon Violet and return to Area 0 to catch a battle-ready Miraidon. And both Pokemon have a speed stat of 135, so you can draw some comparisons to how they would interact with each other. We talked about this in the Koraidon competitive spotlight video, but Miraidon sits in the same speed tier as Tianpao and Fluttermane. So if you can train Miraidon's speed stat to hit 180, you can still get some critical outspeeds on things like Ogerpon and Tornadus. Now I have some good news and some bad news about Miraidon and competitive play. I think I'm going to start with where it struggles. Originally, when I heard that the format was going to be single restricted, I immediately thought of Miraidon as an S tier competitive pick. We now get a powerful electric terrain setter to really boost up those future Paradox Pokemon. But currently, the past counterparts are still outshining the future variants in the metagame. Not only does electric terrain not really have enough future Paradox Pokemon to help, but it's also not staying on the field very long in a metagame that is running rampant with Rillaboom to set grassy terrain, and also in DD Female to really make Shadow Rider Calyrex cracked out of its mind. Miraidon really struggles to keep the terrain control, so it begs the question of whether it's worthwhile to use your single restricted slot for that when you could, let's say, have a Calyrex Shadow Rider. That doesn't mean you can't use Miraidon though. Facing adversity has enabled Miraidon to explore different variations for its movesets, its tear types, and its held items. The actual even better news is that Rajan Ball and Aaron Trailer proved everyone that gaslighted themselves into thinking Miraidon was bad wrong. It's a very, very viable single restricted pick, and on its own merit. Rajan Ball recently won the Indianapolis Regional Championships. And this tournament was so hype because it was the first official Regulation G tournament, and our first glance into how players would prepare and build for a tournament that had championship points and Worlds invites on the line. What was exciting about Rajan and Dr. Trailer's team concept is that it was contrary to a lot of people's popular beliefs about Miraidon teams, either as an electric terrain-focused Quark Drive bot or needing Calm Mind to set up. Their team was simply a Miraidon team surrounded by good Pokemon. You can really lean into Miraidon's stab damage with an electric Terra type. So on top of the 135 special attack stat, the stab as an electric type, the additional stab with an electric Terra, the boost you're getting from Hadron Engine, as well as being on electric terrain in general, you're doing some wild damage. Kyogre is considered to be pretty beefy, but modest 252 special attack Electro Drift from Miraidon with Terra and terrain into a 252 HP, 252 special defense bold Kyogre with an Assault Vest is still a guaranteed one-hit knockout, minimum 120% damage. Miraidon has a ton of viable moves it can use. Electric-type attacks have always been pretty special attack heavy, so on top of Electro Drift, you have Thunder, Thunderbolt, Volt Switch, Discharge, and Parabolic Charge. Parabolic Charge is an interesting move because while the base power is only 65, the move is restoring the user's HP up to 50% of the damage dealt. It also hits everything on the field, and yes, that does include your partner. You might want to be a little careful of that, but the move is doing more damage than you think. Volt Switch provides so much utility in its pivoting power, whether it's to help you reset the terrain against a Rillaboom or an Indeedee, or to change out Miraidon's positioning if it's in a bad spot. Looking back at Rajan and Aaron's team, Miraidon was choice specs with an electric Terra type and a moveset of Electro Drift, Draco Meteor, Volt Switch, and Discharge. Plenty of powerful attacks to choose from, and a team that was incredibly synergistic to really boost Miraidon's effectiveness and damage output. You have cycling through Incineroar's U-turn and Miraidon's Volt Switch, speed control through Tail-1-9 Whipsicott or Trick Room on Fergarath, as well as supportive options like Helping Hand, Follow Me, and Encore. What was most interesting, though, was how Discharge fit onto the team. Discharge falls into the same type of category as Parabolic Charge, where you're dealing spread damage to everything on the field, including your allies. This is not a new strategy in competitive Pokemon, though, as we've seen Discharge and Earthquake strategies in the past. In fact, Ryota Otsubo won the 2017 Pokemon World Championships with Earthquake on his Crocodile and Discharge on his Tapu Koko. Similarly, on this Miraidon team, the team has plenty of Protects and even ground typing on both the Blood Moon or Saluna and a Ground Terra on the Fergarath to get around that self-damage. All in all, an incredibly successful team and a wonderful showcase into the true potential of Miraidon. But will it stay that way? Whenever a Pokemon wins a tournament, especially an unexpected one, all eyes turn towards it. Most people expected Ice Rider or Shadow Rider Calyrex would win, and most people had counted Miraidon out entirely, myself included. Rajan Ball winning the Indianapolis Regional Championships and Aaron Traylor getting top 8 has put a pretty big target on this team's back, and a lot of curiosity behind trying it out. This team is pretty hard to play though. There's a lot of positional choices that you need to make for Miraidon and its friends in order to carve out the right board advantage. This meta is also not super lenient towards mistakes, and having to play perfectly is a tough ask over such a grueling tournament environment. But there's a lot of room to still think creatively about Miraidon builds once you throw out those preconceived notions that you have to lean into the natural Quark Drive synergy. Electric Terrain has other benefits like preventing Pokemon from falling asleep around all of those pesky Amoonguss running around. And Miraidon also gets a ton of fun coverage options like Dazzling Gleam and Flash Cannon that you can experiment with. Maybe even throw a Fairy Terra type on there. There's also potentially some iteration on Calm Mind and bulky sets if the meta starts to slow down. As for partners, Iron Hands is starting to see some more play, as are Dondozo and Tatsugiri. But please don't build Dondozo, I just want it to be Dondozo. I'm excited to see where Miraidon is going to go with the rest of the single restricted regulation heading into the World Championships. I hope you all enjoyed the video, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.